And so we have at this time a presentation of two experiences, and I'll introduce each speaker just before they begin and ask us to, again, journal and reflect on that before we open it up for discussion to follow. So our first presenter on experiences is Ross Jones, who is currently the rector at St. Ignatius College in Riverview in Sydney, Australia. He's previously been the rector at St. Aloysius College, Milsons Point in Sydney, Australia, and before that the Socius to the Australian Provincial and the Assistant for Schools. He has a background in Ignatian spirituality and pedagogy, the history of Jesuit education and schooling, and he has worked in educating students and staff in the examen, in discernment, and finding God in all things, and for the past 10 years has been accompanying groups of 16 and 17-year-old boys on a 3-week immersion program to the Philippines with the motto, learning to serve and serving to learn, and reflection and journaling is at the heart of their experience. It's my pleasure to introduce Ross Jones.
Thank you. I think I should put your minds at rest to begin with. I don't want to reposition the exam in the school. I think we have enough exams in the school. That should be examen. The examen, as we all know, is the central prayer that comes out of the exercises of Ignatius. And I don't know about all your experiences, but in Australia, I don't think we were sharing that experience as much with the boys. All the boys love the prayer for generosity. They say that very regularly. They know it off by heart. But we don't think Ignatius even wrote that prayer. I was very keen that we reposition the examen in our schools. It was interesting, 20 years ago, the first school in Australia to put the examen into the timetable was a Lutheran school in South Australia. I think Ignatius would have smiled at that outcome. But in our schools, the examen was, we say, hit and miss. Some boys would experience, some boys would not. Some religion teachers would use it often, others not. Some boys who went on retreats or immersion or service programs would know the examen. The boys who did not do that maybe did not experience it. So 3 years ago, the Ignatius Centre in the school, the director of Ignatian formation, the religion teachers, those responsible for retreats and pastoral care, they asked the headmaster and the school executive, how can we reposition that examen in the school to form the staff and to form the students? Thankfully, the headmaster and the school executive said, yes, this is very important. So in the school we have a 6-period day, and it was decided that after the third period of the day at midday, the school would stop, and for 5 minutes we would do the examen. That was making a very bold statement about the place of the examen and the place for reflection and pausing in the life of the school day. But the first thing we had to do was to educate the staff. What is the nature of this prayer? Why are we introducing it into the school? What do we hope will be the fruits of it? For many staff, we had to begin with sharing with them what is spirituality, this understanding of our relationship, our connection with creation, with others, with life history, and of course with God. What meaning do we make of those connections? And then we had to show the development from that general concept of spirituality to an Ignatian spirituality, and then how that Ignatian spirituality would inform the examen. And what would be the fruits of that examen? As Father Provincial said early this morning, the experience of that encounter with God is understanding who I am and the sort of person I want to become. And of course the examen is the basis for being able to discern that. We had to teach the staff how to lead the examen in 5 minutes. There was a bell that went at the end of that period, then 5 minutes to have that prayer. and it had to be finished within 5 minutes. We took the very traditional sequence of the examen, and I like this diagram which comes out, many of you may have seen it, it comes out of some old publications of the Society, maybe 300 years old. So it's a mnemonic, how to remember the 5 steps, and it has a small figure there to remind you. I think you know what those steps are. First of all, to pray for something that you are grateful for. That reminds the person that everything we have is God's gift, and God is the giver, the creator, and we are the created. That establishes the relationship. The second step is to ask for the gift of enlightenment, to have the boys ask for that grace, that gift, to see the last 24 hours with clear eyes, not with filters, not selectively, and not deciding to not consider something, but to see everything with honesty and openness. The third step, of course, is the heart of it, to take the boys through the last 24 hours. Where have been the movements of the Spirit, the true voice? Where have they found love and goodness and truth and justice? And to be grateful for those experiences as they relive them. The fourth step, which will always surface, is where have I been walking in a different direction to God? Where have I been listening to the false voices? Do teenage boys know the difference between the true voice and the false voice? Of course they do. Not all of them think in terms of God or the Holy Spirit, but they do know about those movements, those allurements that take them one way or take them another way. And finally, the fifth step is to look ahead over the next 24 hours to come. What is on the horizon? What is the challenge? Where do I need help? I like this diagram here. If you can see it, this little mnemonic, the little figure is looking at the day ahead, and they have a man slaying a dragon. That must have been a pretty challenging day. I've been very strict with this format, that I did not want this 5 minutes to drift off into any sort of prayer. That some well-intentioned teacher might want to say the rosary or the Angelus or do a yoga lesson or just tell the boys to put their heads on the desk and chill out for 5 minutes and relax. We wanted this to be an experience of the examen. But at the same time, we wanted variety. So in educating the staff, all that background material about the spirituality that underlied the examen, we gave them all 8 different examens to choose from. Some of them were for young students, some of them were for more mature students, some developed different themes. There is one in there that is to be done optionally on a Monday, which is the first day back after the weekend sport. In our schools in Australia, all the students play sport on the weekend for the school, and there is much to reflect on in a sports game. The coaches in sports have a very critical position for the boys. The boys listen to coaches. The coaches are almost like a chaplain, and it's good to educate the coach so that they also, at the end of a game, need to draw out where was the good spirit in that game and where was the false spirit, so that the game does not end with just blaming or criticising the referee or the other side. They look for those significant movements within themselves. And so we have an examen post-sport. This handbook, as I said, was developed for the staff. And we have normal period bells that ring to change the periods. We have a special bell that rings for the examen. So nobody is confused. They know this bell is the examen bell. This is not to change period from 2 to 3 or 3 to 4. This is the signal. We found that there were some staff who were a bit uncomfortable with leading the examen, either because they were shy, lacking confidence, or, as we heard from other speakers this morning, they were not Catholic, maybe non-Christian. So we also took another step to record these 8 versions of the examen, recorded by boys, recorded by staff members, and this copy goes somehow onto the net, don't ask me how, and the staff members can get it on their laptop in the classroom, and the examen will be led through the room, and the teacher just supervises, and the voice comes somewhere out of heaven. Did we make any mistakes in this program? Yes, one very fundamental mistake. After I announced we were going to do the examen, and we would start school 5 minutes earlier to fit the examen into the timetable, of course the student union came up to us and said, you did not discuss this with us to start school 5 minutes early. So the headmaster nearly collapsed the omission, but the head of the union said, it's okay, this is a good idea. We will start 5 minutes earlier, there's no problem. So that's good. Do the staff like it? The majority, yes. Do the boys like it? Yes, they do. Because some traditional prayers have boys stretching out into heaven, searching for a God they are not quite sure that they know. But the examen takes them into their own experience, which is very rich, and they find the movement of God's Spirit there. I think that builds on Ignatius's axiom to go in by the other person's door, and then you draw them out your own. Are there any problems along the way? Yes, there is always original sin. So sometimes when I walk around the school at midday, I still see a teacher teaching ancient Greek when they should be doing the examen. They extend the period extra 5 minutes for me to teach maths. So there is that temptation, and once or twice a year we have to remind the staff, this is not negotiable. This will happen at 12 o'clock. Everything else will stop. Does every teacher love the examen, embrace it with enthusiasm? No. Do the majority? Yes. Does every boy love the examen and embrace it? No. The majority? Yes. And some even take it home to teach their parents. So that is our experience. I have brought copies of these for everyone. You can collect later if it is of use. That was an Australian forest we destroyed to make these, so don't worry about Australia. And maybe I can give you the soft copy somehow through the organisers here. You can take home and adjust, modify, translate in your own context. And I hope you have some success with it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross. So at this time, I'm going to introduce our second presenter on experience, Mrs. Ulrike Gentner. She is the Vice Director of the Heinrich Pesch Haus, Ludwigshafen on the Rhine in Germany. She's the leader of the family education in the Heinrich Pesch Haus, Ludwigshafen. She's a co-leader of the ZIP Center of Ignatian Education. She is a trainer for diversity management and project management and the author of various articles in the fields of participation and didactics. She has developed and supported programs with the Ignatian profile for schools and colleges, including living environment in school and college, organizational development, self-management, leadership skills, spirituality, and retreat and network. It is a great pleasure to introduce to you Mrs. Ulrike Gentner.
I will focus two major issues. A short presentation of our center in Ludwigshafen, and a second, I will explain an example of best practice. What is ZIP? A short version. The Center of Ignatian Education was founded in 2013 and is located in the Heinrich Pesch Haus, a Center for Adult Education in Germany. By networking and interconnection, the center promotes an approved learning and teaching culture within the German-speaking world. The center provides a platform for all people shaping the future of colleges, respectively schools. Here they can discuss and reflect the essentials of Ignatian education as well as everyday school life. In this way, the center contributes to a better quality of our educational institutions. Our center is related to an idea that is not you. Compare, for example, Jesuit Institute in Oxford or Loyola Institute in Sydney. We are developing the Ignatian profile of the school, respectively colleges, in different ways. Each school, each college on its own. With our help, schools develop their unique and distinctive topics on a clear profile which can be evaluated. The entire system of the Jesuit schools or colleges. In workshops, we encourage the participants to exchange their views and opinions, to reflect and to develop their education in the Ignatian tradition. Each individual working within a specific approach. In trainings, we offer to individuals the possibility to develop in a spiritual way. For spiritual renewal, they are different retreat programs. It is for headmasters of the colleges, directors of the schools, boarding school directors, teachers, voluntary and full-time pastoral workers, and youth workers, students, parents, and administrative staff in Jesuit schools and colleges, religious and in public educational institutions. Now let's take a closer look at the three pillars of ZIP. Ignatian education, Ignatian spirituality, and Ignatian leadership. Some examples. The Ignatian way, how to do, introduction to Ignatian thinking and acting with seminars and workshops. A basic course true to life in Christian faith. For example, we made movies and a curriculum. For others, there's the spiritual exercises. Leading, how to do in terms of personality, tools, and skills. Furthermore, self-management, allowing others to be led, and leading others. That is our center, our platform. Now I would like to continue by drawing your attention on a selected best practice. Translated from German into English and from English into Spanish and French, I hope the items are clear and understandable. Now please imagine following workshop setting. An indispensable feature of our workshops are the regular breaks for reflecting. In a silent period, the participants pause to think and try to trace their impulses and new insights. The following questions guide the participants through this period of reflection. We made some cards to the port people. Hearing and discerning, differentiating and deepening, developing. Let's share. What moves or touches me? I'll explore my attitude. What has kindled my enthusiasm? Where did I have my doubts? Or do I perhaps want too much? And what are the things I do not want enough? What can help me to become free again? Because if I try to feel my inner movements, I can face them. Did I manage to stay unbiased? Openness amongst all participants results in an openness in the process and result. Was I able to allow the other participants some space? And did I listen to them? What is on the other people's mind? I have followed their thoughts, feelings, and intentions of the other speakers attentively, always appreciative, and without judgment. I'm trying to get down to their motivation. Instead of banging against shut doors, I'm trying to find a common ground. With our shared objective, I realize, even if we differ in opinion, there is still a common denominator. This is what we want to find, because we can assume that everybody has best intentions at heart. In what way is God connected with that what has been heard and experienced? I am open to the spiritual dimension and let myself be guided by God. You, my God, what would you tell me now? What do the results that we have reached mean for me? At the end of the workshop, I try to relate the commonly reached result with my own person, my own situation. What is my own specific next step? What will I consciously give up? What will I myself take up next? The first step is the leader of the workshop guides the participants through these periods of reflection and gives support if it is necessary. As a result, the person are conversant with this approach. At home, the card can help person to practice that, and the card will remember to concenter. At the long run, persons go deeper with the training and their experiences. And this is suitable for teachers and headmasters as well as for pupils. There's not enough time to share a second best practice, only it is about create as a team. And it is done by young people from Berlin Canisius College, and it's a youth work on a Ignatian way. And it's all about how people are working together. And the reaction of a teacher seeing this card was that could be very helpful for teaching staff as well. As a result, in our center, we made presently 8 cards helping people in daily life and giving support on their spirituality. We go forward to awake consciousness. And now, thank you for sharing.
Let's just take a moment again and reflect on Ross and Ulrika's presentation on the experience before we open up more discussion. again, today the focus is on the person of conscience, consciousness, and we had some presentations on experience in school that assists people in their formation. So again, what I'd like to do is just open this up for reflection, and I appreciate everybody was very timely in offering your thoughts in our last discussion. One thing that people did learn is so that it can be heard not only in the room but in the distance attendees is to hold the microphone relatively close to your mouth. Okay? So who would like to begin continuing the discussion? Pete.
My name is Pete Musso, and I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. I'm interested in encouraging parents as participants and models of the way we proceed for their sons and daughters, and how as schools we can not only partner with but make suggestions to parents that help their sons and daughters to be successful in our schools. And I'm also referencing the notion of success that we talked about earlier. Based on research about the effect of parent involvement at schools, we know that mere parent involvement in schools does not equate to student success. Rather, we know that parents who model very specific positive educational and spiritual habits at home do impact student success at school. Taking this notion and flipping it and then flipping it again, I want to comment on the first experience shared with a question. How can we challenge students to teach their parents the examen so that it can become more than a prayer that is experienced at school, but rather a prayer that becomes a habit at home, whereby becoming a concrete, effective tool to improve students and their families. And perhaps it is this practice that is the transformation that can happen again in our schools. Thank you.
Yes.
I am Pepe Menendez from Jesuitas Educación here in Barcelona, Spain. I got the impression, or at least that's what I seem to get from the two presentations linked to the previous discussion before the break. Well, we are kind of gradually focusing on the fact that what's important is to accompany the people, to inspire, to provoke, to get our students to react. But us here, in the discussions we have in the Education Institute here in Barcelona, we call it the vital or lifelong project of the students and of the educators. Because now, and even on the basis of the last comment, sometimes I get the impression that we go straight onto the families, but we don't really work on the educators before that. I mean, there's a task we have that's with the educators first and foremost. We have to actually, go directly to them. I love what Father George said before from his own context, from his own reality, and within a process that we might term of ongoing improvement, of excellence. Maybe we could even link it up to the cura personalis, okay? This process of accompanying people, but always focused on their own lifelong project. Because for us, this lifelong project is more than academic attainment or the academic knowledge of the teachers, and helps us as an educational community to accompany our students and their families as well later on. But we think that we have to work first and foremost within the context of the educators and students in this idea.
Yes.
It's for education in the Netherlands. And in my culture, a real challenge is the speed of today's society. We're all going so fast, it's very difficult for us to contemplate and to be silent and to reflect. And we're also very rational, and I can imagine these workshops or methods you presented can help us to slow down and to contemplate and to reflect and to learn to discern with our heart. Maybe you can tell something about that.
Seems to me that ties back some of the thoughts from George too on the view of education as being very utilitarian and getting us from one point to another, and yet that balance of pedagogy with spirituality. Certainly there's a lot of pressure on schools for the pace. I know at our school we talk a lot about trying to teach digital discipleship for students in a technology age, and what is the influence of technology relative to their spiritual life and their interiority. Yes, in the back of the room.
My name is Sophie Lassagne. I come from France, and I am a trainer in the Ignatian Training Center. I just have a question about the exam. The examen. I ask myself, what are the positive effects of this for students and teachers on a long. Ross, you said you began this experience 2 years ago. So, since that, is that the effects very, very good? And my second question, do the staff observe a transformation of the conscience of the teachers and of the students now?
Ross, I don't know if you'd want to respond. That microphone broke. I think the first question was, have you seen the results of the examen over a longer period of time, right? And then the second was the impact on people, on the performers. Is there a microphone that we could get to Ross?
We have no formal evaluation of the effect of the examen, but when you hear boys talk about it, and you hear staff talk about it, it is quite clear that this is not something foreign, something imposed. And many boys speak positively about it, and parents tell me that their sons talk about it at home. So I have no quantitative figures, but I think it is, the seed is growing. Could I add one more thing? There have been some comments about pausing and reflecting. There is one phrase I love very much by a Dominican, I have to say, not a Jesuit, Meister Eckhart. He says, we progress by stopping. We progress by stopping. I think he could almost have been a Jesuit. That's a wonderful phrase.
I know at my school we've had an examen for 10 years. It doesn't last 5 minutes, it's shorter than that, which was, I think Joe earlier today was talking about the risk of becoming excellent versus the core of the mission of helping form one's interiority and soul. I remember when we decided to put the examen into the school, our academic council, each academic department chair, spent the better part of a day and a half trying to determine where we would take 3 minutes from the academic day in order to have this period of prayer and reflection. And so I thought that was in some ways a healthy struggle because they were prioritizing cognitive formation, but I also smiled a little bit because of the priority. And of course, I would say that it's a much embraced aspect of our school today. Other comments, questions, reflections? Yes, sir.
Fabián Antunes
Fabian Antunes from Argentina and Uruguay. Maybe a question, a more practical-minded question. The examen, does it take place in the classroom, in the same classroom, or do the students actually move to some other space in order to carry out the examen? And I would also like to know, maybe later on you can give me more detail about some variants, because one of the difficulties that we have, well, is routine. I mean, students get bored quickly when something becomes too repetitive, yeah, even though repetition is important. Thank you.
Sure. So Ross said that they stay in the classroom. And again, I know at my school they stay in the classroom, but what we've instructed them to do, no matter where you are, stop. So when the examen comes on over our system, there's a bell. And if a student's walking in the hallway, we actually instruct our staff so that we don't answer the phones. We stop meetings we're in, which is always interesting when you have someone external in the building, say a parent or somebody from a company or a civic leader, and the school stops. Other comments, questions? Yes.
Arturo Moscoso, I'm a Jesuit from Bolivia in South America. Listening to Father George, I was thinking very much on the issue of actually training conscience, and talking about the examen, I really feel very convinced about the fact that there are many things in life that we are eventually not aware of or conscious about till we don't live them or suffer them. It's the case of the example of the Good Samaritan. And I mean, in that example, it's not just being aware of the fact that there is a brother who's a victim and who has been a victim of violence or exploitation, but rather one never becomes completely aware of this until one lives the same, and one is a victim of violence or a victim of exploitation. That's why it's important that in life, in order to be aware, to be conscious of something, one has to go to the limits of life. Yeah, one has to live the borders of life. The limits, because very often we are theoretically conscious and theoretically aware, but to be really conscious you have to live, you have to suffer with the others, and that way you become really conscious, really aware. And that's why I think that our schools help a lot, at least I'm talking from the Bolivian experience. Our students, in order for them to be made aware of poverty, they suffer poverty. So it's not sufficient really to say, well, I'm going to go visit the poor. I am well aware of the fact that there are poor people living near me, but they have to actually experience it, and that happens to many of us, or many of migrant people. It's all very nice to talk about migrant populations, but when do you become aware? When you live as a migrant, that's when you really are conscious. And in that sense, then, I would like to end by saying that I think it's important that in our schools we get our students to experience right to the limit. I mean, to live extreme experiences for them to develop this awareness of other realities. Thank you.
Yes, in the back middle.
Soy Enrique.
I am Enrique from Barcelona, a Jesuit here in the Spain province. I want to follow the issue of the examen and congratulate the two speakers for their experiences. But I want to add another ingredient, which is time, as an important important ingredient when you are managing not only the time you devote to this, but the tempo within education, yeah? In life and in music and in spirituality, both time and tempo are very important, the two. If one is missing, everything goes down like a house of cards. So I would like to add that one must devote time so that we can work on this interior reflection and also have time to give words to what one is experiencing, because sometimes, and especially in young people, it's very difficult for them to express in words what they feel. And then also the complement of going to action, okay? So what justifies all this, and its reflection too, is the finalistic dimension of Ignatian spirituality, because that is towards what? I mean, a human being is educated, what for? It's what they said at the end of the spiritual exercises. So it's the effort of generating time and to start earlier. Thank you.
I enjoyed listening to Ulrika's presentation. The various forms of questions for the steps all take time to process, to put into one's own words what the answers to those questions are. So clearly something that's outlined in a series of steps takes time, and I would agree. I know in my school 3 minutes for an exam isn't nearly enough, but it's coupled with other, I'm sure, reflective opportunities for the students. Yes.
Carlos Cupo, Jesuit in Spain. It has been mentioned this morning already, and now we are really taking a step forward, aren't we? Because we are focusing on the examen. It means the reflection on becoming conscious and aware through concrete practices and experiences, as is the examen. And the main issue, and this is a question for all of you, is it what I do? Or is it what I receive? Because the issue here is gratitude, or is it personal analysis? The issue then here, is it God, or is it I myself? What I mean by this is that I understand that in different contexts, the figure of God Father cannot be directly invoked. But what is the substitute of the word God? What could it be? It's an open question for discussion. José Miguel Colina, coordinator of the East Spain Jesuit schools. I think that within the school context, at least here in Spain, I get the feeling that the word examine always has a negative component in a school context. Yeah, when there is an examen, it has to be passed. And that entails at times the fact that the practice of the examen is abandoned, because at the end of the day, we're not all that good because we don't always pass, and we always repeat the same things, and, you know. So I don't know if it's always good to talk about examine. Should we find maybe another word that would substitute this concept with the same spirit? Carlos was saying it before. I think that one possible way of focusing on this and being more aware of what teachers and educators go through is to help them look at reality in another way. And that should be part of the examen. It would be the first point, really. I mean, really, to go into it. In my case, when I stop to analyze my reality, my relationships, what I'm doing, the way I'm doing things, and I see it looking for what I have to be grateful about, what I receive, that generates in myself a feeling, a way of being within myself and regarding God that's a bit different. And on the basis of that, I can think, how can I improve? What can we all improve upon? As a way to make sure that this way of seeing reality leads me to gratefulness, and then to the conscience, to the awareness that what I take from my surrounding leads me to commitment towards myself and the others. This is what we were mentioning now about our relationship as educators with families, when you go along with parents in meetings for preparations of first communions or, confirmation. Well, I don't know, in Spain at least, the key issue is dialogue. Very often have all that much influence on the spiritual life of their children because they don't have time. They're all so busy. So one has to help, couples, first of all, to have time to speak to each other, mother and father, and not to talk only to kind of, point out what they didn't do, but rather say, what do we have to be grateful about in each other? And what do we have to be grateful about to God? And what can we improve upon together? Well, I think this is a kind of examen as well that helps towards more healthy relationships based on peace and building from there. Because that way you are aware of your reality and you see how much you can be grateful for. And then on the basis of that, you can improve.
Me of Pete's recent comment about flipping the examen with families. So we're going to go just here and then back up front and then back that way.
Bueno, mi nombre es Julio.
I'm Julio Navarro from Argentina. My reflection is based on the issue that what is substantial of a school, of a Jesuit school, is that it is a school where we can ask about this pause, about the examen, and how this examen can give meaning to everyday examens and exams that would happen in the different curricula subjects. So then how to train our educators in such a way that what was learned in science, language, or maths can be used to reflect and go beyond and see what is there. Is there anything new in what I just learned? In what way does this have an impact on my heart? And how can I apply this to life? So it means then to look for God everywhere. And essentially in what we learn within the classroom.
Front here, please, with the microphone. Javier.
Sí, soy Javier.
Yeah, I'm Javier Aragay from Barcelona. When I was listening to the experiences and to some of the remarks, I was remembering what, at least in our schools, we find difficult to find time for. That is, actions that increase this conscience. I think that this seminar here can be a very good chance to be honest with each other as well, to tell each other about the difficulties of this. In my case, I was quite amused when I was listening about Ross's experience, talking about these 5 minutes, and people complained. Or when David was telling us about the difficulties as well, because we all encounter many difficulties because we are also implementing experiences like these, and it's very, very hard. Maybe we should also share these difficulties with each other, and maybe one of the consensus that we might get to during today is to actually call and make a greater effort to compensate this technical deficiency, because we have the pressure of the academic curricula, we have the pressure of the schedules, the timetables, the pressure of what has to be taught, precisely because it's such a good system. But we do have to fight to make sure we have space for silence, space and time for examen, for conscience, for being and looking in our inner selves. We have to really fight for this. If we don't be a bit rebellious, if we don't request this and get to an agreement, looking at each other and saying that this is indeed one of the most important things that we have to do, then, I don't know, the pressure of governments and curricula and even momentum itself of the world of academia leads us to be perfect machines that teach content all the time, but that are not, in fact, creating conscience.
In the middle of the room? Yes, there, and then Bill, I'll come to you next.
Mauricio García
from Colombia. Listening to the presentation and the experiences, I'm somewhat restless as to up to what point conscience and awareness is only a personal experience, or is it also a collective experience? And the challenge that we have in making headway in the two directions. I'm saying this on the basis of the experience in our schools. It's not enough to be aware or to be conscious of my personal reality or the personal reality of my students, but rather what's necessary as well is to have an awareness of the reality of the country, of the context in which we are, the problems that we all live. In Colombia, we try to develop some experiences in that direction. For example, there's a very interesting link between the Jesuit Service for Refugees and Schools and the SJR college program, where we try and help the young people to become collectively aware regarding the problems that are lived that have to do with conflict, displacement and violence. But in that context in Colombia, the challenge is huge concerning how to gain conscience in that we have to build a culture of peace in a country that has been living in conflict for 50 years. So there we have a challenge that we cannot reduce simply to the individual awareness of personal reality, but rather it entails being aware, being conscious of a collective reality, and in what way collectively we can be committed towards the transformation of that reality.
Bill? Thank you. Bill Kameza from Boston. I want to say two things. One is that we are beginning to experiment. I'm very much appreciative of what Ross has said. We just do it once a week at BC High. But but I also want to mention something else, which has been fascinating to me, that we have just begun, and we've only done this once, and it's not been successful. But I think the future will say that it will be successful. We have 3 times a year or more, we bring in people from outside of the school. They may be our graduates, perhaps not, who are authors or well-known people to lecture to our boys. And they often have written books that our boys are reading in class. And we've done this for a number of years, and we also invite outside people in for this. This year, we decided, instead of doing it the traditional way of inviting in people to be lecturers, to instead say, we are going to invite you in, and then we are going to do the interview of the examen with you. And what's been fascinating for me has been that the people who are most secular, most distant from us, the ones who have responded that they want to do it, have been the most interested, because they thought it gives them a chance to reflect on their lives. Now, we have changed the examen when we sent the questions out to some to be a little bit more secular, but we told them the original purpose. And so far, the interest has been very high. Now, I said we failed the first time. We failed because in the first time we did not prepare the questionnaire as well as we should have, and that was the big mistake. But our hope is, and we invite students to come to the lecture. They don't all have to be there, but in fact they often do. They will often fill the hall. And my hope is actually eventually, and something we might consider if you have had experiences like this, is that we will edit this down to about, the interview itself ran about 25 minutes. We will edit them down to about 10 minutes and put them on the web, on our web, and perhaps other schools are doing the same thing. And we can share these experiences among our schools. Because among other things, we find that our students are looking for models of people who are reflectors and models for their own lives. And for us to bring in what we would call relatively successful or accomplished in their own way, people to speak to our boys and have them do reflection, seems to be a pretty interesting thing, and those folks want to do it too. That's it.
Thank you. Yes, just right here.
India, Bombay province. In one of our schools, St. Mary's ICSE, we had what is known as breathing exercise. Every day after the lunch break, children were put into an exercise for 10 minutes, and they did that breathing exercise. It was very successful. And teachers looked at it from a utilitarian point of view, that it quietened the children, helped the children to concentrate and focus. In India, we also have one teaching period, what is known as yoga, to quieten the mind and body, etc. I was happy to hear the experiment that Father Ross had in his school, and I am thinking that we need to go further using this breathing exercise to create that into a format of examination of conscience without even mentioning the name. And so also the yoga period, which is there as a mandatory in our school timetable, can be used to prepare this structure of examination of conscience.
Casey? Casey Bomir from Boston College. I love that we're having this conversation, and just down the hall is the cave of St. Ignatius, because it seems to me that in that cave took place the first examination of conscience in our tradition. That over a prolonged period of time, Ignatius learned how to be reflective, and he had to remove himself from action in many ways. I mean, he wasn't in the cave perpetually, but he needed that space. And I think for us to keep that in mind, that just down the hall from us is that space, and that speaks to what we're talking about right now. I think that ultimately the examination is about relating. When I teach the examen, I stress the capacity to be relating, and it's to be relating to Jesus. I think the distinctive Jesuit feature is to relate to Jesus, and that we might not speak about it so explicitly, but if we look at Jesus in his inner chamber of the heart, when he goes off to a deserted place, it's the hidden life at the beginning. Just like for Ignatius, the cave was a hidden life of sorts, and that in that cave, just like Jesus, Ignatius grows in wisdom and age and favor before God and others. And that's what we want for our students. We want our students to be able to grow in wisdom and age and favor. And that's the ultimate goal. So that in that capacity, that cave becomes the place of composition. So in the variety that we want to encourage for students to be able to examine, maybe the answer is right in our midst, that we think about how that cave translates. And if it's 3 minutes or 5 minutes, grace builds on nature, that there should be a cumulative effect of that. But if we don't have that relationality in it, going into the inner chamber just becomes a self-focused capacity. It's to grow into that inner chamber and then ultimately to be able to relate to others. And I often find that, at least in the university, when we talk about examination, it's so interior. We forget about that capacity for relating. And that's, to be Christ-like, I think, is to be relating. And that's why we come to a place like a cave, so that we can go out. That's a big piece of what we want.
Marianne Gallagher from Washington, D.C. I have a question. Has anyone, or can or has the examen been adapted for institutional reflection? Can we ask the question, what is the community grateful for? Where did the community listen to the wrong voice? Where has the institution, where is the resolve of the institution for tomorrow? I know we're using it in terms of personal formation, but can it also be a tool for institutional reflection, like an apostolic audit sort of thing?
Hi, I'm Juan Cristobal from Chile, Jesuit. Listening to all of us, I get the impression that in conversation we sometimes mix two questions or two challenges that are different and that obviously are very much linked to each other. But I think it's important to establish a clear difference or distinction. There is a challenge that has to do with developing this inner self and the ability to reflect, but there's another challenge that has to do with educating about the action of God within myself and the world. And in Ignatian spirituality, the two things are linked together. And in times of Ignatius, it was one single thing. But nowadays, in the secular world, they are easily seen separate. And sometimes I get worried in that we mix up one and the other. And I think we have to tackle the two challenges. I mean, mean, on the one hand, we have groups of young people, and maybe the first step is how to help them to grow within their inner self. It means personal reflection. But there's the second step as well that has to do with what has been mentioned, going to the experience of God acting in the world, and a special sensitivity. And sometimes we only stay with the first. So it's not a question of establishing priorities, but we have to be well aware when we educate that these are two steps, and maybe the exercises are one thing is an examine of who starts the exercises, but the other is of an examine that has to do with following Jesus Christ. And I think we have to establish the distinction or go back to it, because there are different stages and goals in education depending on how we make these two explicit.
Again, a nice synthesizing comment on the relationship between pedagogy and spirituality. Yes, Brent, please.
Muy interesante.
Really very interesting to listen to the different contributions. I was wondering right now if each one of us had to write what we understand or what we think is examine, what would happen? Would we all be in agreement, or would there be many differences? And I think this has been mentioned as well. I mean, how do we analyze? How do each one of us analyze the examine? I think it's a very, very powerful tool for spiritual life and for human life, for knowledge of oneself and knowledge of the others. So this is a tool that we have to know how to use. And of course, we all have experiences, yeah? I mean, it's been mentioned already. Maybe you insist on a first week, second, third, yeah? But you have to kind of keep going. But I think it was Javier, he was saying something important. When we have difficulties, Ross was saying that 50% or more accept it fine, others don't. So I was wondering, wouldn't it be possible to say, to the whole staff and all the students and the families, well, you see that the level, I'm setting it very high, but couldn't we say to them, listen, during 3 months, we're going to go for an examen, but in these conditions, and after 3 months, we're going to evaluate and see whether this has changed our lives, whether this has changed the life of the school, the way we function, the way we relate to each other. Because now, currently, everything is evaluated, and one has to give statistics and quantify everything, so maybe we could get them to get aware of the fact that this helps, and then people would want to do it more. That's all. Thanks.
Yes, right here.
Sí, Luis Tarín.
Yeah, Luis Tarín from Barcelona. On the basis of a question that was asked regarding whether we had thought of an institutional examen. Well, I would dare think out loud with all of you here about things I have been thinking that have to do with an institutional examen. I hope it's useful. This is based on what we do in the Jesuitas Educación here in Barcelona, inspired, of course, by the work of the whole of the Society of Jesus. I think that institutionally speaking, it's very important to realize that there is a kind of ladder of reflection. We can't really get the institution in itself, the whole group of technical staff and other staff and families and students, because this is what the institution is, right? Not only the educators, but all the group. It's very difficult to get them all as a unity to reflect together. I think that there's a ladder, there are different levels. There's a first level, institutionally speaking, that is that of pre-reflection. It means that reflection as such has not happened yet. It's just a certain awareness, analysis that has to do with how are we organized, what about the schedules, what about discipline. But this is, as I say, a very weak institutional level. It's not enough, and to remain or stay at this level is not at all sufficient. And those of us who are directors or have to organize these institutions and work on this service have to go beyond. We can't remain at this level. So then there's a second institutional level, which is reflection, to reflect, but a superficial kind of reflection. It is a reflection that has to do with strategies, methods, needs of the students, needs of the educators, needs of the families. But even this level of reflection is insufficient, although it is very interesting indeed. There is a third institutional level, which is a more pedagogical reflection. It's deeper. It's a reflection that is in the quest of what happens within the classroom and the learning of our students. And truly, it is much deeper than the other two levels. To analyze consequences as well, but consequences of the learnings, and very often consequences in the academic plane. But here, our obligation, our duty as an institution is to go beyond, and we would reach then a fourth level of deeper reflection, critical reflection, reflection that in fact is looking for not only conscience and awareness, but conscience and awareness for change, for transformation, as we were saying before. And this critical reflection, this critical institutional reflection looks for implications, ethical, moral implications, but especially the consequences of living the presence of Jesus in our reality, in our daily lives. And when we get to this deeper level of critical reflection, when we become aware and conscious of the consequences of what we do in an Ignatian key, is when I really believe that institutionally we are fulfilling our mission. Critical reflection, and this morning it has been mentioned already, critical reflection always leads us to consequences and to move on to action, because to reflect without going on to action, as we were saying before, is sterile. It's useless. We have to go to action. That's all. I'm ending now. So then I think that this, I really am coming to the end. If you translate this in very direct terms, it means to think institutionally in the mission, the strategy, the positioning, the participation of all, and to think about the impact of what we do. So it's being transparent and to be accountable as well. Anyway, I could say so much more, but I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are excellent points, and I'm glad you're scared of me at the 3-minute mark. Here's Jose Mesa was there. I also, as we're passing the microphone to Jose, those comments about institutional, and Marianne, your question, we didn't have much chance to see it, but Ulrika's, the discernment process for team, I thought there were some things there I saw in the materials beforehand that I would encourage people to look at. Jose? We have time for a couple of more reflections before we finish.
José Mesa, Curia General.
Jose Mesa from the Curia General. I wanted to get back to a certain tension that I detected. Especially I detect it when I go and I visit different schools. It's something that we all experience between our Ignatian identity and the maintenance or keeping up our Ignatian identity in our schools, but on the other hand to welcome diversity. Whatever diversity, religious diversity, social diversity, political diversity. And I want to point out that there is a certain tension. I don't have the answer, but I have detected this. And I know that what I have seen sometimes in Africa is different from what is done in India, and it's different to what I've seen you do here in Europe, or what I know of my Latin American continent, or what I have seen in the States. But the tension exists, and it is something that we should still be concerned about, and all together we should try and make sure that without losing our identity, because of course it's what convokes us first of all and what moves us to teach, and it's in fact the only reason why we educate, because of our Ignatian identity, but see how we can open up to diversity without losing our identity. It's a tension occurring, and I hope this tension will give us life and make us creative. It is true that we come from a past in which we were, well, somewhat afraid. We didn't want our identity to become just, a kind of mindset that would not open up to diversity, but we can't go to the other extreme, and we can't give up our identity because we open up to diversity. We can't make our identity society become a null curriculum. I don't think that that would be the answer either. We should not lose our identity. So, well, I'm inviting us all to discern on something that I see in all the regions of the society. It's something we are concerned about.
I think we have time for two more.
Chris Hayes from Melbourne, Australia. Thank you, Jose, for those comments about tension and challenge. One of the things that I find in my school is how do you continue the conversation about those challenges and tensions. And one of the things that we do on a yearly basis is that we take our vision, mission and guiding principles and take a phrase from them and begin a yearly discussion and conversation within our staff, our students and our parents. Last year our theme was setting hearts on fire. This year it was a faith that does justice. And one thing that I'm steeling myself for next year is the theme of striving for the margis, but using the Jesuit maxim of non multa sed multum. In other words, it's not the many things we do, it is the depth of doing the important things well. And with so many competing factors and pressures in our schools, as have already been mentioned today, our focus is what really matters in our Jesuit education.
Thank you, and I think we're going to end in Ireland for a few comments.
Peter McVerry from Ireland. I'm very interested in what I've heard about the value of the examen in schools. I must confess I personally haven't used the examen for many, many years. I suspect I'm not alone. And my suggestion is maybe somebody would lead us over the next few days in a 5-minute examen during the day.
That's actually that's an excellent suggestion, and it's a wonderful segue into this moment of reflection that I'm going to offer you now. And I believe there are materials. Do we have the materials that the speakers? No. That Ross. I wonder if the image of that hand is something. Whoever's controlling this board, is that something that we could put back up? There are also paper handouts that are going around, I understand. This is the moderator figuring things out on the fly. So people have things in their hands, but again, if we have that image up, this isn't, Peter, exactly what you asked for, but it is a nice segue to this period of reflection that we want to have before we break. So let's just take a minute and review some of what we've done this morning. Considering that we are so close to the cave and we've been reminded of that, we were told by the provincial, Father Francisco Jose Ruiz, that what happened to Ignatius there was a surprise. God finding him at Manresa. We also heard about this person of conscience in the tradition of Ignatius from the cave coming out and being so inspired and called by God to help souls, that at the core or the center of that soul is one's conscience, and how we develop that conscience, how we come to understand it, how we formulate and train conscience, how we allow space and time for God to visit us in the development of that conscience and that soul, how different religions of the world seem to be in that agreement about God's voice in who we are becoming, about how we take those high ideals and apply them in our schools, to our students, to the teachers, the formation directors of those students, to parents. And we considered some challenges and obstacles to that type of formation. Challenges in education and its utilitarianism, challenges in the disparity of resource that exists, challenges in what people come to expect of education, challenges of matters of faith and diversity. So as we take a break and consider the presentations and our colleagues' comments, we're going to move to a period of personal reflection. Following the period, and in a moment I'll present 3 questions for us to consider. Following that, which will be approximately a half an hour, lunch is served at 1:15, and then we will be back here at 3 o'clock. Are there any other details we need to cover? And in the free time, provided that you're back here by 3 o'clock, you can be outside, go for a walk, whatever you would like to do. So the 3 questions we offer for reflection in considering the person of conscience and all we have heard and considered: what has moved me? What touches me? Where did God surprise me? What did I hear that helps me to know what is on the mind of other people? And where is our shared objective? Where is our shared objective? As again in this segment we heard from people representing Ireland, France, the Netherlands, Spain, the United States, Germany, Australia, Chile, Colombia, Barcelona, Bolivia, Argentina and Uruguay, and India, and Germany. I think I said that. So those are our questions for 30 minutes of personal reflection, and again, lunch is at 1:15, and you're back in this room at 3 o'clock. Thank you.